Okay, next we're moving on to bag VB here in the kit, as it says here in the manual. These are all just metal pieces. Everything's unique, so easy to tell the difference between all the little pieces. Use glue thread lock. I'll put it together as it says here in the manual, and then I will just show you the finished product, and that'll be kind of a better visual of how this looks. And then we'll start putting together all the other pieces of the frames, and I'll let you know any tips that we find as we come along. So next we'll show you the finished product once these guys are together. Okay, and here is the finished product of this step. Really simple, it all came together really easy. These parts are machined, everything just has fit just nice and perfectly and smooth. You can probably see, you know, nothing's out of place. There are 4 small screws that are 3x6. Those ones go into the bottom part. All of the 3x8 ones go in the top, and then these 2 on the sides are the big ones. The bearings are already installed, and one thing that you might notice is these little servo mounts have these nuts in them already, so make sure those are facing towards the front, because the servos are going to come in like this, and then you'll be screwing them in the back. So those will be facing forward. Those are probably the only things you'll probably be questioning. These 2 seem identical and pretty much symmetrical. So as long as you've got it configured like this, you are good to go. Next part in the manual here, it looks like we're going to start putting together some of the frame. So we're going to pull out, it looks like bag VC, and take a look at all those pieces, take a look at the frame, carbon fiber sections, sand those off, talk about doing that, and come back and take a look at these parts before we start putting them together, and then we'll follow the manual, put them together, and then show you that whole thing. Looks like we also have the rear bearing block in here that we're going to add. So we'll pull that out and show you that thing. Okay, now moving on in the assembly, we'll get the parts to add to this. We've got these little carbon fiber pieces. All of the carbon fiber stuff came together in a bag. Open that bag, you'll find these little pieces. These are going to go on here like so. Line up all the screws. There's a bunch of hardware here in bag VC. We're going to use all that stuff, clean these off, make sure we're using glue thread lock. Looks like anti-rotation bracket, canopy mounts, and some stuff for the servos. Make sure you also sand around all the edges of these carbon fiber pieces. And we also have the rear bearing block with, looks like this metal slant gear. This thing is pretty tough. So I like the idea of a nice tough gear. Looks like the other one I think will be plastic against this, so we'll have a sacrificial gear if necessary. Oh, actually, yeah, it will be this this red piece will be what is going up against that. So I like that setup. Looks like it'll be very tough. So we'll put this whole thing together. Just make sure you pay close attention to all the sizes. Everything, all the pictures are to scale, so if you have to hold the screws next to it to make sure that it's the right size, you can do that. Otherwise, if you have a set of calipers, just make sure you go through and you're meticulous about measuring all the screws and using them in the right spots. And also it looks like we've got some little washers here to add as well. So we'll go through that and we'll put this together and show you the finished product once we're done with it. Okay, now this is the assembly fully completed. You'll notice the smaller screws are used to hold the auto rotation bracket. This part in the front, and then holding the little brace in here in the frame. All of the larger screws, the 3x8s, used here, here, here. These top spots here, and then also used to hold the canopy mounts in place back here. You'll notice we don't have screws on all of these lower holes, not yet. And then this bearing block was pretty simple. There's already a bearing in here, so you push that in there, and then once you get that in, you can get these top screws. I also put in the cyclic servos. The longer skinny screws are used for the back, and there's also this spacer that goes between the frame and the servo. and then you also have these plastic nuts in the back that hold the servo in place. The smaller skinny screws are used here on the front cyclic servos, and my servos fit in just fine. I've read where some guys have issues getting their servos to fit, but no issues here. So this is the complete product, and now we will move on to the next step, which is the rest of the frame. It looks like this main base part is the two large slabs of carbon fiber, and then this carbon fiber support beam in the middle. We've got some other mounts, it looks like here. A lot of hardware. Looks like we're going to be pulling out bag VD. So we'll get that bag, we'll get this hardware and all this stuff together, and we'll show you that stuff before we put it together. Okay, now this next part, we've pulled out all of the carbon fiber pieces, these huge slabs here, and these little center mounts and braces. So pretty thick helicopter, it looks like. So that hardware, and then all of the other hardware, this VD bag that you're looking for, that's the one with the skids in it, and all of the hardware is in a little bag in there. So it looks like we've got a whole lot of hardware, a whole lot of spacers, a whole lot of washers, and a lot of cleaning screws, putting thread lock on them, and putting all that stuff together to get this frame assembled. So we'll come together and show you this thing once we've got it all put together, and I will let you know if I have any other notes or tips once I'm going through the process and following what it has here in the manual. Okay, moving right along here with the frame assembly, we have used most of these 3x8mm screws to hold in this bottom little frame stiffener here. Here's a little exploded view. I haven't put the other side in. So all of these little carbon fiber slabs have little tap screws. So we're going to use those screws to go through the top, and once you screw those in, they'll be nice and flush, so make sure you hit the right side. Screw those into all of these little brace frame supports. So you can see how that looks right there. Got a lot of these here. The two different looking supports here are going to go in the back with the tail servo. So you can see how there's these two big flat spots, and make sure that they come in, fairly flat this way. They might bend a little bit, but you'll have to make sure you hold them pretty tight here as you tighten them. And on this side, you can see how everything looks. I got some nice yellow skids. The really long screw that comes with the hardware, I think it's 18mm screw, that is going to go through this little thing here in the back, this guy, and that is going to go into this little hole. The smaller screws that you see in the hardware are going to go into the mounts for the skids, and those go in the frames. You can see this other frame here. So everything fits in really nice. The smaller washers also go with the smaller screws, and there's another set of washers that goes with the servo screws here. Carbon fiber, the flat spot faces where the batteries are going to be. I think this is where we're going to put the batteries in here and then strap it in. And we've got little holes here for the straps. There's a hole here in the back for adjusting for the size of your tail servo. And here we go, here with the entire frame, minus the extra side of the mount. But, pretty simple. Everything comes together, fits really nice. There's still a couple holes that we haven't screwed things in yet. Also mind that here in the manual, as you can see, this little piece of electronic mount, this little piece right here, as you can see, the top one, we're using this little 3x16 screw right here, so we're going to screw that in, and then on the other side we're going to screw this little guy. This in the manual looks a little different than what it looks like over here. So I don't know, maybe I picked the wrong spot or the wrong part, but I don't think so. I didn't see anything that looked exactly like this. But for now I will just put that there, and we'll keep this tubing, you know, just to make sure we're not breaking anything. So we'll put the other side of the frame on and then just give you one quick last look here at the frame, and we'll start looking at the main gear and that entire assembly. Okay, and here we are with the finished front portion of the frame. Got the other side frame on there, looking nice and, I mean, this is a pretty large size frame, definitely the largest that I've built so far, and I haven't even put the rear part on yet. So this is what it looks like. Next part, we will take this back part of the frame, and it looks like we'll be putting it on this front part. So in order to do that, we are going to pull all the parts and hardware out of bag VE. See, as noted here in the manual. So that's got these little metal support units, got a bunch of hardware in here. The main gear, this huge thing, already put together. My screws already had thread lock and they were on nice and tight. So I don't know, you might want to make sure that you double check that yours are tight, same as this one. That part was taken care of. You've also got these two metal washers, and those will go in place here later on each side of the main gear. So that's these parts. We're going to follow, just like the last step, follow along, use all this hardware that's supplied, put these two parts together. You can see these little metal parts go right here. So after I put this together, again, we'll show you this whole thing once it's complete, and that'll give you a better idea of what it looks like. Okay, some tips for putting this part together. Make sure you don't forget all these little balls. They go here in front of this little motor mount right here. See these little gaps? So you're going to want to put those in there. And make sure they face the correct direction. So push them in like so. So you're going to have to put those on both sides. So don't forget those. If you put the whole thing together and you realize those aren't in there, you're going to have to take it all apart and go back. So put those in there. What I recommend for this part, what I did was slip this in, and I actually, as you can see the way it is right now, I just put the screw in the back, and then I will line it up and put the screws in all of these other holes. So we'll get that whole thing lined up and tightened. And again, make sure you don't forget these balls in here. And doing the back first will make it a lot easier, because you got to kind of hold it in place, slip it in back there, line it up, and then screw it in there. It's kind of hard to do by yourself. But once you get those in, got it in on the other side too, it's pretty much just a piece of cake, and everything lines up great. So we'll get all these other screws in here and finish up this assembly and show you this whole thing when it's finished. Okay, now we are almost done with the frame part. We've got the basic 3x18. I think we've got 5 of those in here that went through this little metal piece here and then through this part of the frame. And then some 3x8s that went here in the front. Just put those in finally, and make sure you've got those balls in there. If you don't have those inside, like we just talked about, you'll have to take it apart and make sure you get those in there. And make sure they're facing the right way, so that the screws that go through in there for the motor mount can go in there the way they're supposed to. And then it should be able to slide back and forth so you can adjust the mesh. So there is that part of the frame. Like I said, these are already pre-made. And if we're going on to the next part, we may be looking for the VF bag, but for me that stuff was basically taken apart and a part of the frame assembly, or the gear assembly, which was already put together. So this little Jesus bolt, basically once we put the sleeve there on the main shaft, we push it up into this top gear, push that into after we've pushed the main gear, or the main shaft through on the bottom. So once we push that up, then we push the main gear in there, and then we're going to screw that together. So this little part we'll finish up. These little collars you might find in this bag here with the swash plate. So once you pull all those little pieces out, just follow as it says in here, and if I've got any tips after going through it myself, I will let you guys know. So in the meantime, we'll just kind of finish up the frame, get this section done, and show you how it looks when it's ready to go. Okay guys, I just put this main shaft in here for the first time. It's 15mm beefy main shaft, but I've been tightening everything pretty well the whole way through. Usually I have to keep something loose up here, but I figured, I'm just going to tighten it, see how well everything goes through, and if necessary I loosen things up if I have to retighten it just to make sure that this is smooth. But the moment I drop this thing in here, it just goes right through, and from the top here I just drop it. That's smooth. To get that after tightening everything, and that's just the way it is, that is going to be smooth. No wear on the bearings at all. Usually if it's tight and hard to push through, you know that you're kind of wearing on your bearings a little bit. But when it's moving through like that smooth, that's about as good as it gets, guys. So yeah, this is going to be a nice helicopter for sure. Okay, and here we are with the finished product, almost. All you have to do is put the swash plate and the head on. One thing to note, this red gear may be rubbing up against this frame, so I did have to do quite a bit of sanding up here to make sure that there was enough clearance in there. But now it's moving through nice and smooth. Same thing here, sand that down. What I actually did was, there was the two bearings, or the washers, and it said to put one under and one over this main gear. I actually just put both of them in between the red and the black gear to give this black gear a little bit more clearance. So I sanded up here and actually just put that there, and it looked like it was good because this collar here, it's still almost flush, and it has the indentation that goes out in both areas, and when the washer was in there was just a little bit of play. So you can put the washers on the top and the bottom, but you'll have to do a lot of sanding here, or you can probably put both of those washers in here, and it looks like it'll work out just fine. And everything's nice and smooth. You can see the red gears now making contact with this torque tube gear, that metal torque tube gear there in the front that will drive the tail, and the one-way bearing pushes one way, not the other way. So working the way it should. It's a little tricky. You put the main gear through here, put the red gear on first, and then the sleeve, and then there's that little pin you put in there, and then make sure you push it up against the red gear, and then you put the main gear on with let's see, I can probably show you here better in the drawing. So the part of the gear that faces up, if you can see here, it's the part that's got all those little slots in it. So it seems like counterintuitive to what it is. So it's that part right there, which faces up. You can see how the gear is facing. So it's going to be rotating that way, and the little herringbone goes out in this direction. So make sure you get all of that stuff in the correct direction. This is all good to go. Very large frame, and now we will be moving on to, looks like in this next page, now we will be putting together these little linkage rods, putting the swash plate on, and then putting the head on the top. Pretty simple and straightforward. We'll find these 4x27, which we pulled out of a bag much earlier when we pulled all this head stuff out. So we'll get that stuff out, get the head together, finish up the frame. Probably won't set up the servos yet. We'll probably just put the linkage rods to the side and we'll measure those up later. And then after that we will be moving on to the tail. Okay, and here we are finished up with the main frame. We've put everything together with the head. Swash plate went on pretty smooth, pretty easy. Everything moves around nice and smooth, up and down. Everything's fitting nice and perfect. These snapped on really well. Everything rotates great. So pretty simple and straightforward. This is the frame. And now we will start moving on to the tail.